Welcome to the Journos on PLZ Soccer's premium service. I'm Peter Martin. Hugh, MacDonald, Michael Grant and Alison McConnell are here with me in the studio. Thank you so much for your support. If you want to gain early access to the Journos, you can do by signing up to our subscription service, PLZ Premium. It's on the homepage of our YouTube channel. Of course, you get to listen to it on our PLZ Soccer YouTube channel a little later on in the week as well. But if you want it first, get on to PLZ Premium. We've got lots to talk about, and one of the problems that never seems to go away at the moment from the start of the season onwards is the predicament that Russell Martin finds himself in at Rangers, because quite simply their midweek game against Bruges was a catalogue of disasters, Hugh, and you can't spin your way out of this one.
Yeah, particularly when it isn't a freak. You know, particularly when you say to yourself, this is the way they've been losing goals, not only in the Champions League, but against Alloa. You know, I was interested to see Russell Martin say, "We'll never lose goals like that again." And you say, well, you might have said that on the Saturday, never mind the Wednesday. There's an air of frenetic, almost panic around the situation at the moment, and I think that's the players are feeling that as well. And players looked to me anyway in the first half hour really nervous. And the stuff about we won the second half is frankly I'll not cut it, because if a team's up 3-0 at half time, they're counting their Champions League bonus and they just want to see the game out. So again, for Rangers, to cut to the chase, it's almost immediately a situation in which they've found themselves over the last, 3 or 4 managers.
I just wonder, and it just shows you the nature of football, especially in the UK, more than anything else, that if you get to the catastrophic situation, which ultimately is losing to St Mirren and then going into Bruges, losing that game, and then suddenly you've got Celtic on your doorstep, does it get to the point where it's an untenable position for him that quickly out of August?
I suppose the one unknown in all this, Peter, is that the new American owners. You know, we don't know how patient they're going to be, what their attitude is going to be to a struggling manager, to a kind of mutinous fan base. I mean, it feels like 5 minutes since we were sitting down with the chief executive, Patrick Stewart, and getting a vote of confidence on Philip Clement. It was in January. And here we are again with the next Rangers manager going into exactly the same cycle. I mean, speaking to Hugh before we came on air, I mean, Russell Martin's been in the job 2.5 months, 8 games. And already, as you say, it feels almost like bubbling up to a kind of crisis point with these kind of games coming up that you're talking about. It's hard to see. It's not hard to see where the next win comes from Rangers, but it's difficult to see where the next really convincing kind of significant result and performance comes from, because I think they will lose to Bruges in the second leg. At the moment, they don't look equipped to deal with Celtic either, because they give up too many chances. Defensively, they're chaotic. So it is rinse and repeat. It's exactly the kind of sequence that Rangers have been desperate to avoid, this kind of pressure on the manager, get rid of the manager, start again. But, the team has to start delivering, and it really isn't under Russell Martin so far.
That catchphrase that Michael just alluded to there was a John Bennett. It was then an interim in John Gilligan, and then it was Patrick Stewart mentioning rinse and repeat. But it doesn't help when you've appointed somebody that suddenly is starting from a negative position, Ali. He's not the flavour of the month. He's not what they hoped would be the man riding in as if to say, right, I'm going to change the fortunes. He wasn't high stock.
Yeah, I don't think he was a popular appointment to begin with, and I think he was swimming against the current a wee bit in that respect. But I think the start, shipping points on the opening day of the league campaign to Motherwell, following that up with a draw against Dundee, I think any manager would struggle in such circumstances. I think you would also say that he's failed the first big test that he's had, arguably. I don't think Rangers fans would maybe have expected to make it into the Champions League this season. I think if you had to go to July and say, you're going to get through all these qualifiers, are you strong enough as a team and as a club just now to go into the Champions League? I think most people would have said no. Not yet. However,
most Rangers fans?
I think so. I think people would have. I think there would be a realism around whether or not they would be Champions League ready. And negotiating qualifiers are always fraught when they come, the start of the season, before you've got a settled squad. However, what they will find unforgivable is the points shipped domestically. So already you're getting to the end of August and you could be potentially 7 or perhaps 10 points behind Celtic before really a ball has been kicked in earnest. That's unpalatable to a Rangers supporters base. I think this season would have settled even for competitiveness in the title, just pushing Celtic, a competitive league and staying in the fight for the title. But what you've seen, I think, is a chaos around the team. We heard about this fast-flowing, attacking football, a very clear style that was going to be implemented under Russell Martin. Have we seen it yet? It looks as though it's a club in disarray. The fragility around the players is palpable. I think they look spooked at points. They don't seem to be able to cope with any kind of adversity. And I think you can sense the toxic nature already within the stand. You could sense it last night at 2-0, 3-0 after 20 minutes. Fans are leaving, they're walking out, jeers, boos ringing out. You've got players who have just walked into that environment who look utterly shell-shocked.
Well, the unfortunate thing about it, I take your point, Michael. I think if the boards are anything worth their salt, they just have to persevere with the pain of it all and take the flack that's coming undoubtedly from the stands. If they're going to show a bit of backbone and say, right, okay, I don't know if you can see in the background, they're starting to try and ship out the people, the deadwood, the people, the losers, the people who are not able to deliver anything credible for Rangers over the last couple of years. And if he can get one or two others, then I think they've just got to persevere with him. I would, in his only defence, I would say for the game on Tuesday night, that if you have a game plan and a strategy to go and play against a side that I thought were better than them before a ball was kicked, what in your mind do you say when you're sitting in the dugout and 2.5 minutes into it, one of your defenders thinks it's okay to let a ball bounce halfway between the goals and his goalkeeper and not think there's somebody running behind them?
I mean, this guy cost £10 million earlier this year for Wolves from Red Star Belgrade. So this is a guy that an English Premier League club has looked at and thought, this is a substantial prospect in central defence. And like you feel sympathy for Russell Martin on that. I think on the subsequent goals, the second one especially, you think, well, that's just defensively is not set up. It doesn't look well coached. It doesn't look well managed.
I don't like zonal marking, do you?
No, but it can work. It is a proven system that top managers do use. So it's not fundamentally wrong if you've got the right defenders applying it. But Ali's point about the general weakness of the defending is really important because it undermines everything. They don't have a foundation to build results on, Rangers, because they're giving away so many cheap goals.
Even chances, before you get to, if you look at that previous round, what was it, 101 chances across 3 games?
That's the stat that's doing the rounds, isn't it? And we knew this about Russell Martin's teams, didn't we? We knew that they give up chances, and defensively he's not got a strong track record. He's got a decent track record in some other aspects. Some of the football he played at Southampton was good, and entertaining, and got them up and so on. But this season is starting exactly like all Rangers season starts. They drop points immediately. They go out of the Champions League before the group stage. The manager's under enormous pressure in autumn. I don't see any change to the sequence at the moment.
I think the problem is he would have had credit in the bank with a strong start. I think if he'd started the league campaign fairly strongly, people can handle going out in a playoff round in the Champions League. They can accept that the club just aren't quite there yet. But the problem is you're seeing the same issues raise their head time and again. 2 goals conceded against Alloa. The defending was atrocious. That first goal against Alloa is comical.
It's funny you mentioned a point there, and again, it's all about opinions. This is not an exact science that I'm arguing with you on the perception of Rangers fans. Some Rangers fans who would say, we'll take dropping into the Europa League. I'm not too sure there's a huge amount of them believed that, Hugh. We interviewed people after the games, before the games, and you've got a group of supporters who think, we'll beat them, We'll been to the Champions League. I've never met anybody of Rangers fans that I hang about with who turn around and go, well, we're not good enough. We're not going to beat them. We'll settle for the Europa League. I see it.
When I was interviewing people, even prior to this round, the Panathinaikos, the mood that was coming back was of uncertainty. There wasn't a huge groundswell of genuine optimism.
When you think about it as well, I mean, when Panathinaikos initially, everybody was saying, well, they'll probably go out there. They'll probably go out there.
Yeah.
I think the central problem is that, though, is time. That's a problem. It always is. When you sit down and these guys, top businessmen who made their money in healthcare and even in sports business and events, and they sit down and say, right, what's our 5-year plan, or what's our 2-year plan, and what's our this plan and that plan? And then it all gets drowned out in a cascade of booze. In reality, I mean, that's Rangers' problem, and that's why they've got rinse and repeat. And it's why, when it happens, they say, no, we're not going to sack the manager. Now, if you said to me, a man of my age and experience in Scottish football in terms of going to matches, a Rangers manager can lose at home to Queen's Park in the Scottish Cup and not lose his job the next day, that's impossible. So Rangers did show patience then. They said, no, we're not going to rinse and repeat. We're going to stick to him. But it very quickly became untenable.
Yeah.
It's unravelling. If you talk to Paddy Marath even this morning, he's a clever man. He's worked at the top end of sport, made his money, etc. Even with his Leeds experiences and that, he's probably saying, do you know what, teething problems, I believe in the process or whatever. But the process gets derailed by reality.
It's also it's a different environment.
It's a completely
to anywhere
different
else.
environment. It's like any other club, even clubs in the Premier League. Leave Man City can have a season last season by their terms was poor. That's okay. Chelsea can have a season that is poor. Even Manchester United, poor. Arsenal have won in for 5 years. It's completely and utterly different, and it's not just me saying that. We were talking earlier about conversation with Gordon Strachan in his early days at Celtic, just saying this is a guy who knows the business, has been a manager, has taken a club kept clubs in the Premier League, taken to FA Cup finals, has played in Scotland with great distinction, knows it, and he goes, my God, I mean, this is just the pressure's almost unsustainable.
The intensity of it, the microscopic intensity of it.
I remember speaking to John Bennett when he was at Rangers, and he was talking about they had played Betis, and he said we were out they have dinner, don't they, with the directors of the opposite club, and he said that we spoke to Betis, and they had gone through a restructuring Betis, and they'd basically almost surrendered any hope of being competitive for a year or two, and Bennett was kind of talking about how much he envied that kind of luxury.
The breathing space.
To kind of go, right, okay, we need to change this and it'll take a bit of time because we don't get that time in Scotland, Rangers and Celtic and even the lesser clubs, the smaller clubs. So it is it's that intolerance and impatience and kind of constant. So Patrick Stewart is saying about Clement in January, no, we're not sacking him, we're sticking with him, he gets sacked. Because they kept dropping points, they kept falling further away, and it's so frequent now with Rangers because it's annual, isn't it? That you get these boos, and everybody knows there's going to be boos at half time. People are kind of putting the telly on if they're not watching the game to hear the boos at half time, full time. But beyond that, it's almost like at what point does the booing become so toxic? Like you saw it memorably when Beale lost to Aberdeen.
And after the Celtic, remember as well at Ibrox, when they lost to Celtic that campaign
but
as well.
Remember they sacked him the day after the Aberdeen game, didn't they? Because it was like, this is just off the scale.
Yeah.
And I mean, the way it's heading for Russell Martin, there'll be a day like that'll just be okay. It's over.
If you are looking at this is where it is uncharted territory where we don't know the backbone of this board. I think they have to show a spine, a strong will to actually say, we're going to take the pain and stick by him. and give him that period up until January, unless, Hugh, and this is always unless,
There's always an
and it's not bearing in mind the madness of Scottish football. It's bearing in mind any club in the across the globe, unless you get to a situation where even as a board you can't see progress on the park and it just becomes untenable. But I think from this point of view, as you say, we're into August. Yes, the next 3 games could be painful. I mean, in my mind, I'm looking at the next 3 games and I'm thinking, Rangers get a point. I've got Rangers down for 1 point. I don't know whether it's coming at St Mirren or it's coming in the game against Celtic, but I've got them taking possibly 1 point, and I'm being generous with them, and I'm looking at them and I'm saying you're going to lose to Bruges. That's where I see August ending. The other thing about it is, usually in Scotland, and certainly the evidence of Dundee is a classic example of Dundee and Dundee United, you usually get that real instability, Hugh, when you've got what I call the sweetie wives and the people who've got the ears of chairmen and chief executives and board members, of fans who just have got no patience. And this is a different board. And I think they're going to stick by him for as long as you don't get into that position where you say the manager doesn't know what he's doing. And that's a board decision. But I think they've got to stick with him.
Yeah, well, I think, it comes down to business strategies. And see, if you were a businessman with business strategies, say, of course we're staying with them. This is a few bumps in the road. We've just given them 20 million to spend. The players are not bedded in yet. It's so many games. We didn't expect to qualify for Champions League. We'll win the Europa League. Yeah, we're a bit about behind Celtic, but we knew it was going to be pain. Yada, 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 yada. Now, we've had this conversation in this programme so many times. We had it once when Michael was here, but I always remember we were sitting there. I don't know what month it was, but one of the crises that Rangers had just passed, and we said, well, do you think Philip Clement will be the Rangers manager next season? And we all said no.
Yeah, but I think there was a greater amount of evidence for us to say no. This guy is just in the door. Yeah. He's in the door coming from a negative position where they don't like him, they didn't want him, and the board might have looked at it and seen the potential, but the fans were looking and going, Russell Martin, are you kidding me?
Yeah. But also, in a club, Rangers, like all clubs, they do have to be conscious of the kind of message that they're putting out. And sacking a manager after 8 games is not a good message. It's not a good look.
Yes.
It doesn't make them look serious. It doesn't make the board's judgment look sound. Now, I'm with you. I think Russell Martin has to get more time and just see. He talked about turning around a tanker, and okay. They all say that, don't they? All the managers have said that we inherited a mess and we've got to turn it around. Rangers fans are up in arms at the moment, and that'll get worse if they drop points at St Mirren or if they lose to Celtic. But I think you have to give a manager time up to a point. Yeah. Up to a point you think, this just isn't working. Mm-hmm. And I don't think 8 games is a fair body of work to assess a guy on that basis.
Another problem is, and you've got to look at a sensible board looks at this, and even with putative, they're not daft, even with putative things like they'll have their exit plan, this doesn't work out well and all that. Who do they go for next? Mm-hmm. It's not, they're not a great cache of top class managers who, and it's frankly will be willing to come to Ibrox. We saw the interview process last time. It was, it's Mourinho, it's Sean Dyche, it's such and such and such, and you end up with Ancelotti Jr. and Russell Martin in a shootout, basically. Yeah. What are you going to get next time? On the back again, you'll get a manager. People want to manage Rangers, don't get me wrong, but I'm talking about the level coming in. You'll probably have to take an untried younger guy to come in, or you go back to, you go to a guy and say, right, we just make him head coach and we take everything away from him and try to do it that way so we can slot head coaches in or out. It's a very interesting decision for them, but if they have understood the philosophy at Ibrox, and it's there to be seen and heard, it was once up in the walls, and it was once sung before games, simply the best, and we're the best club in the world. It's a culture where it's very difficult. It's very easy to say at the beginning of the journey, or whatever you want to call it, this is going to be painful. and this is going to be a tankard, and this has got to be turned round, and this is a mess, and got to that. That's great. And everybody buys into that in the close season, says, oh, we'll get 4 new signings and new manager. Then you drop Motherwell. Then you drop home at Dundee. And then you get beaten in the Champions League. People go, they forget about all that patience.
Yeah.
And this is a tanker. This is a tanker that's sinking, they say.
The philosophy of patience is great. The reality of it is an entirely
Absolutely.
different.
It also costs a fortune to sack managers.
Yeah.
Yes,
You've got
Backroom
paying off
teams
the
and-
backroom team, starting again to recruit other guys that you might have to pay compensation for them. You've also got a mongrel squad that's signed by 3 or 4 or 5,
Which you
different
can't get
managers,
rid of.
which,
I was going to say to you, with failure, the price and stock of individuals who are associated with that failure drops out. I mean, I think, one of the strange things about it, ridiculous. I think Eagleman scored 2 weeks in the trot and he was worth 30 million all of a sudden. Not from sensible thinking people, but the point here is they've got players that they're trying to get out and trying to get a wee bit of money. I think Raskin looks as if he's totally and utterly disinterested. And there are other players who are going to have to get out. And I think, and I saw some people speculating in the press this week, I think James Tavernier must be looking and saying to himself, listen, I've done my bit, just get me out.
Overlooked for the last 2 big games.
You can't play in the Champions League and you're the captain.
The problem is, though, like a lot of these guys are on very substantial salaries. They weren't brought in on the cheap. They're still on big money. You're not going to go. Like the only way that they're going to go is if someone matches what they're on, or whether they better their current terms, which would look unlikely. So it's all well and good to say it's a very bloated squad and these guys aren't going to play. You need a willing buyer to come in and take them.
Well, you saw the exodus last season, and the figures came up, and the figures that they'd sold the cast of the 10 Commandments, and they'd got 800,000 for them. You know, I
And
mean,
a part of that is just get them out. Just go.
of course it is. It's just to say, listen, between the agents, work it out with whatever separate club you want. We'll say we don't want a transfers fee, and you can dilute that into wages, etc. And that's what's going to happen. The thing about Tavernier, I would have the bells ringing about Tavernier. Tavernier's looking at it last night, and the 2 fullback positions are being played by Max Aarons, who I haven't seen have a good game yet.
Yep.
So it's not as if it's a top class guy who's keeping him out, right? But another fullback position is a guy that's just come in the door, and he's 19, and I'd be looking at that and saying it's very, very clear what the manager thinks of me.
Yeah, game's up. Absolutely, I agree with you 100%. It'll be interesting. I don't even think, and I'm going to cut all of us some slack here, I don't even think we should even ask the classic Philippe Clement question of whether we think he will be in charge, out of August, because I think it sounds ludicrous. I just, from a journalistic point of view and from a business point of view and from so many other points of view, other than the Bears going absolutely mental in the stands, I think he's got to be there for a sustained period of time at the moment, however painful that is, Hugh.
That would be my gut feeling, particularly with businessmen. But again, I'll say to you, there's always comes a time where you think it all depends. He's got to get results quickly, and you know what? He's got to get. And this sounds ludicrous. He's got to get results as quickly as Paisley on Sunday.
Yeah.
Well, when you think about it, most of the recent managers that have come in have actually started with good runs, haven't they? I mean, I think Beale had a good league run when he came in. Clement certainly did.
Yeah.
So they did have something to cling on to at first for 2, 3, 4 months.
Absolutely, but then they revert to type.
And then they revert to type. But I mean, with Martin, he just hasn't got out of the blocks at all.
Yeah.
I mean, there's barely a performance so far. Pilsen at home, maybe.
Yeah.
But the others, they're just so full of mistakes, so defensively soft and porous,
And the one last point before we get to St Mirren and obviously other issues that we're going to talk about, with regards to this, he has taken the side and changed it. And I don't know many managers who can suddenly put in all these different players and expect it all to hit the ground running. Is that one moment of it's almost it doesn't cut any slack with the fans, but he's changed the side dramatically. He's trying to get rid of the dross. So he started to bring in his own players, and I don't know when you change a side. Gordon Strachan talked about Armedia Bratislava, but he inherited players he didn't want. and you have to change the side. And that is equally difficult for him. And now, at the moment when he's going through that transitional period, let me tell you, and you guys are all the same in this, we go and watch different football out with Celtic and Rangers. And I watched St Mirren play Hearts off the park in the first half at Paisley at the weekend. I thought they were great. He's got them so well organised. He's got, he plays a 5-3-2, and he must be saying, Michael, Rangers want to play the game now. Rangers want to play the game, so they're that arrogant that they think they're going to get 3 points. Hey, I would put that up on the wall.
100%. I mean, I don't think motivating players isn't a weakness anyway for Robinson, is it? You know, that's clearly a strength in organising a team, and they're physical, and I think they're a handful for anybody. You know, they've almost got something at Parkhead in the opening day. But yeah, as you say, they were going to postpone the game for the good of their Bruges double-header. And now it's like, oh, well, we need to get that one, and so that we're not so that Celtic aren't out of sight going into the Old Firm game, you know. So there is that subtext of, well, we need these 3 points out of the way, so that's fine. The one other thing I would say though, Peter, is, you know, this has all been about the manager, and understandably so, because it'll be him that'll get binned. But the players also have to take responsibility for these performances so far. You know, the Giga's mistake last night was just inexplicable, you know, and you think, and all across all the performances that I've seen so far, certainly the vast majority of them, they give the ball away so cheaply, you know. They don't seem to be aware of players coming to dispossess them. The passing is really erratic, to say the least. Basics. I mean, the stuff about holes in defence, I think that's down to the manager. I mean, that needs to be organised. But I just think the mistakes that they're making and the general lack of aggression and intensity and urgency about them, that's down to the players as well.
Well, the players have to do something, but they have to do it against the side, Hugh, at the weekend that I saw, you know, with a back five who were absolutely solid. Hearts had to change in the second half and made 3 changes in double quick time because St Mirren were in control, and then they were able to look at a strong bench to bring on players to try and facilitate a change in the outcome of the match. And in the end, St Mirren obviously won it in penalties, but that's Hearts out of the cup. And the St Mirren side, the boy Killian Phillips is a player. They play good football. Yes, they've got a wee bit of a nip about them. Bacchus looks as if he's never been away. O'Hara and the Mandarin and a younger up front will cause Rangers problems at the weekend.
It's all that. I mean, it's all that third ball stuff that even caused Celtic problems away from home. They didn't use it as much, or they can't use it as much as Celtic, but they play the ball very quickly up to the front man. The front man plays it on to a midfielder who's on rushing, and the third ball goes over the top, and these guys are going to back themselves in a sprint with most in the league. And it's a very simple tactic, but it's one that it's very difficult to combat at times. I think St Mirren will be looking forward to the game. I think they'll be saying to themselves, you know, they played a different way at Celtic Park, but they didn't look nervous or anything like that. So I think Celtic won a bit more cosily than other people think. I thought Celtic played pretty well. I'm a sort of stick out a bit like sort. I thought Celtic played pretty well that day. Made a lot of chances. Didn't take them. And created a very good goal for it was McCown that scored, wasn't it?
Yeah.
So, but I looked at St Mirren that day and I thought, yeah, they're a Stephen Robinson team.
And I know it's early days, Ali, but you know, I've seen quite a lot of the teams out with Celtic and Rangers as well, and you're trying to get that early gauge of we're all going to come up with a prediction, Michael, on the 1st of September once the window closes to see where everybody's who they've managed. Hedge your bets, who they've managed to sign, because I always think, in fact, I have to offer my sincere apologies to some of the journos who, in their paper, you know, put their heads above the parapet early. We did it for the last 13 years. You know, I think this is going to win the league or that's going to win the league. Some people, I think, you know, just say, I think this team's going to win the league because they support them, rather than any kind of balanced, sensible outlook to it. But I look at the other teams and I'm saying to myself, and this brings me to your Aberdeen mob in a minute that I'm going to mention to you, but I'm looking and saying to myself, I'm trying to analyse, Alison, who's going to be top 6 and who's going to be playoff and relegation. and I'm looking at the early way that the teams are playing and trying to come up with it, and it's bloody difficult.
I think it is difficult. I was really impressed by Hearts. The first couple of games I saw of Hearts, I thought, looked like the real deal. Loads of optimism, loads of encouragement in the performance, and then you think Saturday was their first big test and they fall short. And you think, what does that say and what does it do? So in terms of early impressions, yes, I think, we can all rush to immediate conclusions when you see a chink of light or you see one or two good performances, but it's very early, I think, to pass judgment on just where teams will be. And I would say the same. I've seen Aberdeen twice. I've been entirely unimpressed. I thought they looked very tepid, a real lack of bite up front. But again, a couple of new recruits come in. That may change across the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, I've been to Dundee 3 times in the last, 10, 14 days, Michael, which is quite unusual. It's quite unusual for me.
Years?
Yeah, that's quite unusual for me. But I've been up there and I'm looking at the teams, and Stephen Presley's a work in progress because he's just decided his attitude to Dundee is they lose on average 2 goals last season every game, so I'm going to bolt the back door. Yeah. And what he's done is he's got them organised quickly into a really tight formation so that there's no space between midfield and the back line, which I think is a sensible thing to do. It's not pretty at the moment, but until he gets those other 5 players, then that's what he's going to do. United, on the other hand, I thought played some really good football in Europe. Lost in to Hearts because they ran out of gas. And again, Jim Goodwin's not one for making excuses. They just didn't have it against Kilmarnock. So I look at them and I'm impressed. And that's what I'm saying to myself. I think the one person that I'm keeping my eye on, I don't want to suffer the wrath of the Dons fans, but is Jimmy Thelin, because I look and I say to myself, okay, Celtic and Rangers are going to be top 6, right? Hearts and Hibs are better. And so are Dundee United. And I'm saying to myself,
I don't know about that.
I'm waiting to see what Jimmy Thelin does with his side because of the expectation of that cup win. I'm not saying he's under pressure. Yeah. I'm just saying it's not been a great start, but I look at Aberdeen, I think a lot is expected of them to be Celtic, Rangers, Hearts or Aberdeen, Hibs or Aberdeen.
I think it's really difficult at the moment because there is a lot that's unresolved. I mean, the teams that everybody's played 2 league games so far, but you're playing against varying difficulty of fixture, aren't you? I mean, Aberdeen's 2 fixtures were difficult.
Yes.
Away to Hearts and then Celtic at Pittodrie, right? That's 2 of the 3 probably hardest games you could get. I mean, the problem with Thelin is that his league form is unimpressive over a long period of time, since November last time.
Yes.
I mean, this is no secret to anybody, including him. He knows that has to get better. I think Hearts deserve to beat Aberdeen. I would say that Aberdeen, I thought, were the better team in the second half for quite a long time.
Yeah, until the second goal.
Yeah. But there was about half an hour when you thought Aberdeen are the better side here. Strikers clearly is an issue, and they've signed a winger and they've signed the boy Lazetic from AC Milan. Who knows what impact he'll make, but that is obviously the issue that they're trying to resolve. The other issue you have at the moment is Hibs, like Aberdeen and Hearts, will be affected, like Aberdeen and Hearts have been in previous seasons. Hibs will be affected if they get into the group stage.
Yes.
You would imagine.
Yep.
I imagine Aberdeen's league form will suffer when they're in the group stage, which is obviously going to be problematic. And also you've had teams coming so far against teams that have just played in Europe. So Kelly got a draw at Easter Road from 2-0 down because Hibs began to tire, having played on Thursday night. So, all these kind of factors are up in the air. Livy have made a good start.
Yeah.
Kilmarnock have made a good start. Will it last when they start to hit harder fixtures, signings, the window's still open. Basically, what I'm saying, Peter, is that you're asking this question ridiculously early.
No, I'm not suggesting.
Ask us at Christmas.
I'm not suggesting they're in trouble. I'm suggesting this. I am not looking and saying Jimmy Thellin's going to be in trouble. I'm looking and saying, right, Jimmy, you've won the Scottish Cup. How are you going to take this on? Because the one element that the rest of the teams need like a hole in the head, and I'll give you the team, is St Mirren. Because St Mirren have managed to punch above their weight, and he just keeps tweaking it and adding wee bits of quality, and he's a good manager. So I'm looking and saying, Celtic and Rangers, it's a shoe-in. I don't know that, we're going to decide 1 and 2. Maybe if it all goes catastrophic, somebody comes in and, splits them. Highly unlikely. But then you've got Hearts and Hibs, who are really look, as if they're going in the right direction. And then you've got Dundee United for me, and then Aberdeen, or St Mirren taking Dundee United out of the equation, or taking someone else out. I think they are the team that really hacks off the other managers, because it could have a financial implication if they keep doing well.
And Livingston the same though. I mean, Livingston. I watched Livingston a lot last season, and I thought they would win the championship, and I was wrong. I mean, it went to the last day, but I was wrong because, and the reason I thought it was the definitive style of play, and he had good people in good positions. The Wilson and McGowan at centre back. Who are not going to win the Olympic 100 metres, but they're going to be very decent at that. Yep. The guys in front who knew what they were doing, good players. And I noticed now in the games, young Smith in a wide is really he's coming on to what he's always gone under the radar a wee bit. But he's coming on to what he was in his early days at Hamilton, when people
really
like Celtic
as well,
with a terrible knee injury.
They've got a wee Boyle Lawal at right back who looks the business.
And then they've got the tried and tested and the evergreens, the Pittmans.
Muirhead.
And I just think, with a good manager, and Davy Martindale's a very good coach, I think for teams at the bottom of the league, they're bad news, because I don't think they'll be anywhere near the bottom of the league.
Yeah, I think they'll comfortably stay up as well.
And
I
they
think
might
Falkirk are the ones that are occupying my mind at the moment, because I see them as a championship side. They haven't
reluctantly, because they're not a bad team to watch, But we had to do the newspaper thing, 1 to 12 sort of thing. I did put Falkirk bottom, because at that point they hadn't signed what I thought was enough players to make a difference at the Premier League level, and they probably still haven't, to be honest. Maybe
He's struggling to get them.
He's struggling to get them in, and they've not started well. They've not. You would think maybe they'll get a bounce after back-to-back promotions that come up. 1 point, I think, is it, from 6 so far. They're at Pittodrie next, which will be interesting in the league.
Yeah. It's a tough one. We'll wait till September 1st, Hugh. Is that sensible?
Even then I'll get it wrong. I mean, you could, as I say, but I think it's very interesting, as Michael says, because of all the little ingredients to it. I thought Brendan Rodgers dropped one in where he was talking about the season, saying, Hearts are only playing 1 game a week as a site, and I thought that is a big thing, because it did derail Hearts undoubtedly last season, because a lot of these benches, they're not first team benches, and they're that for a reason, because it's finance. And it's interesting stuff. I think Kettlewell started a wee bit better than I thought as well. So September the 1st will be quite a decent wee bit of respite before I get it wrong again.
And again, if he's not here, we'll get him on a VMix where we need to interview him, and make sure.
I think we've got a Michael Grant hologram somewhere in the pantries.
Very much depend on Aberdeen's results whether I agree to come on or not.
A Michael Grant hologram. That's fantastic.
I'm sure we've got one. I'm sure we made one.
It's like Abba Voyage, isn't it? He just comes out, it's as if he's there,
Aberdeen Voyage.
But with that in mind, we always look and we say to ourselves, September the 1st is because you want to see the recruitment. And again, Tony Bloom's been out in the last 24 hours talking about the fact that, people might be ridiculing the whole process. You have to look at the 2 teams that he's managed to really work wonders with. And I look at the players that they're recruiting, and I wonder how complex and the pattern that other clubs are using in Scottish football, from, like Stephen Robinson says, he doesn't have a JamesTown Analytics. What he has is a guy that he absolutely trusts implicitly, and he says to him, you just go and you watch people. And there's never, in my mind, even going up to September 1st, you'll never be able to replace that ability with your eyes that don't deceive you on a player. Can he play? Has he got certain qualities that you think will be there? The JamesTown Analytics one is really, really interesting, because everybody thinks it's this magic potion that everybody, you know, is wondering what he's got in. You know, it's like the taste of Coca-Cola or Iron Brew. But I look at the thing and I keep reading up on it and I keep looking at the analysis of it, and it's not too far away from the Moneyball of the movie of the Oakland A's. They just constantly look and say to themselves, there's two key elements to it, which is, you know, you've got a sporting director or a scout, but you've also got this set of analysis which looks at age, budget, playing style, and then it looks at, within that budget, here are the top 10 or top 30% of players who are available, whose statistics all fit within certain parameters. And then the last bit, which no computer algorithm can tell you about, is how does that person handle pressure in bigger games against better teams, and what's his lifestyle like in the background? Has he got a family? Is he distracted easily? Is he out partying? You can't get that. You know, I don't think you can start putting them in and say he likes a drink on a Tuesday.
Yeah, and I'm not sure if, I think JamesTown Analytics acknowledge that, don't they?
Yes.
I mean, I think they say, right, here's what we're presenting, here's what we think makes this guy suitable for Hearts, Brighton or Union St Gilloise in Belgium. We sat down with Tony Bloom a couple of weeks ago, and it was really interesting. I mean, this man's faith in JamesTown Analytics is absolute. I mean, he is beyond impressed by what they do. He's completely in bed with JamesTown Analytics, to the extent that, you know, all his claims about what Hearts can do over the next few years in terms of maybe splitting the Old Firm this season, maybe winning the league intending to win the league in a decade and be a Champions League team. All of that is based on JamesTown Analytics, you know, and obviously having a good coach and all the rest of it.
Yes.
But JamesTown Analytics, because Bloom's not going to be pumping millions of pounds worth of his own money into it. Which, when he said that, I thought, you know, how realistic is it to challenge Celtic and Rangers without, to be blunt, throwing money at it? You know, but to him, you get the recruitment right and you can build a team. I'm like you. I think that JamesTown are clearly an impressive company, and I've heard this from people who aren't connected with Hearts, that they're sharp and they're impressive. But there's so many other moving parts to a signing, you know. I mean, they could recommend a guy to Hearts, but he might not want to go to Hearts. His agent might say, I can get more money in the Championship in England or abroad. The stuff that you mentioned about the off-field, you know, does the character fit?
Yeah.
Does the coach want him?
That's it. So this is the one I got pelters for this, as you know, Peter, the first day of the season when they were talking from Hearts fans about, and I think about JamesTown Analytics and Derek McInnes, and that's a big, you know, if you get presented with four centre halves whose ability and whose statistics are off the board, you know, Joe Bloggs from Hajduk Split and whoever from Forest Green and somebody from Reykjavik and somebody else, and they all sit in the pond over that, and Derek McInnes comes in and says, no, I'm signing Stuart Findlay. Now, there is wiggle room there, don't get me wrong, but at one point, these things represent two different philosophies, and at some point, that's what causes the friction, because there's philosophies that can't be resolved.
Yes.
Because if you say to the manager, but this guy at Hajduk Split's better, and Derek McInnes says, no, but I worked for him at Kilmarnock, and he's the centre-half, won the Premier League. And the guy says, no, you're not listening to me. This guy's got, we've done the analytics on Stuart Findlay, X, Y, Z, and I'm using just Stuart Findlay as an example. I think there's possibility for tension.
Who gets final?
And who gets final say?
Yes, but then again, and this is the other aspect of which I think is key to it all. And I was looking up something there that was another movie that I'd watched that I thought was a fantastic movie. And we're talking about trust, because Stephen Robinson trusts his wingman that he knows is going around the games to tell you this, and this, right? And he does it in what I would call the old traditional way. And then once it gets down to, you know, that last couple of games, Stephen Robinson will say, have I got time to go and see him? If I haven't, I'm placing my trust in you because you bring me the players you know I like. With JamesTown Analytics, there is a set of stats. There is, you know, a parameter within. This is the type of player you can afford, and this is a player that we think is worth this now. But you can develop him. You can make him better, and he'll go into this because we've seen his curve. and it goes through this process. Now, and I'm glad I mentioned the word curve, because if you get a chance to see a movie, we were talking about Moneyball, but there's a great movie which sums up what we're all talking about, which is called Trouble with the Curve, which stars Clint Eastwood and Isla Fisher. And it's basically Clint Eastwood, just an old scout who suggests baseball players for this, top baseball team in America, and basically goes and the one that everybody's raving about, he said he can't handle a curveball, and he said, and that's his flaw, and you shouldn't sign him, and I'm telling you, you're going to waste millions in the draft if you pick him, and the dilemma comes between can you, can't you, and then eventually the proof is in the pudding, because he has to basically handle the curveball, and you see him, the boy's been found out, and this is the ultimate part of the process of Jamestown Analytics. Sometimes along the way you'll get a percentage of failures, but it's minimising those failures.
Bloom was interesting about that, because he said, we know that there's other companies out there that do this stuff that Jamestown do, and we know that other clubs use them as well, and Hearts using data is not unique by any means in the Premier League, let alone in football in a wider sense. But he just said, listen, I think they're the best, and I think they're the best by a distance. That's why he's been so in bed with them at Brighton, and to huge profit, as we know at Brighton, and to great success there, and to even greater success in Belgium, where his team won the league after 90 years.
300 million in 3 years, Brighton.
Brighton, yeah. But he said, we'll get some wrong. It's not a linear process that you keep finding these gems. We'll lose out on players and so on. And the other thing about all this, of course, is that McInnes is head coach. That's his job title. It's not manager. For the first time in Derek's career, I think probably his title is head coach.
Yes.
So,
but he did mention, Tony Bloom, key to all this is get a good coach.
Of course, yeah.
Of
course.
Because he makes him a better player. Brendan Rodgers makes players better along the way. Good managers make players better,
Listen, you also have to have the infrastructure. You have to have the training facilities have to be right. Stadium, just the whole support staff has to be right. Jamestown's job is to find guys that are suitable to come in. After then, it's kind of up to Hearts.
Yep. I think the crucial one is who has the final say. That causes all the problems that ever exist in clubs. From Liverpool, Klopp didn't have the final say at Liverpool. It's come more and more now. Head coaches are not having the final say. More and more amongst the top, and they've had to suck it up. And there'll be what I would call legacy managers that are not used to that situation. They're not used to, they're going to, and that's what causes tension.
I still think you can get managers, though, that have that kind of what I call the old traditional David Martindale attitude, that at half time, I don't care who you are, I'm going to absolutely leather you verbally here, because, I don't know what, I'd love to have been a fly in the wall when Rangers came in 3-0 down, and Russell Martin turns round to Jigga and says, what are you doing?
Well, it was funny.
What are you doing?
I thought it was interesting. Russell Martin said yesterday, "What did you do at half time?" He said, "I showed them 2 clips," and I said, "Well, that's a long way from boiling tea and
it's a different
cups."
culture. I think I think very few managers go on like that, go on and sort of redirect. I'm not saying it doesn't happen. I'm not saying it.
I don't think it's extinct. I think there's a lot of managers who still.
I think you will still get it, but also I think a lot of that is the same. He said it at half time in Alloa too, and then showed a couple of clips. Look at where the spaces are.
You have to say they played better in the second half.
Are human beings now at the point where you can't shout at them?
I think that's definitely a thing. I think, and I don't think it's a bad thing either. I know sport is brutal, but I was talking to one manager a couple of years ago, and who had extraordinary success and ability in the game as a manager, and he'd given a big centre forward at half time a right rollicking. He says, but not the kind of rollickings of the old days where people were up against the wall and things. He just rollicked him about not being brave enough physically in the first half. And when he walked down the tunnel, the guy, he saw immediately that he had to intervene again. The guy, he actually had to go to the guy and say, listen, can't, because the guy was distraught.
Yeah, but
Completely distraught.
and I'd love to see the Jamestown Analytics for now, people who can't handle, you know, a rollicking. I know, I accept it.
Through a culture of school being
I
different
accept a
and
different culture,
training being different.
but this is margins. This is fine margins. I'll give you an example of the extreme, right? That Hugh's talking about, right? And there's a great story with Sir Alex Ferguson, the build up to a game against Celtic. He goes, Charlie Nicholas is playing, and Neil Cooper wound up like a coiled spring, and in 30 seconds, and I give you within 30 seconds, 12 seconds I think they timed it at, he'd already banjoed Nicholas from the centre half, the centre
That's a
kick-off.
legitimate tackle.
Absolutely, I thought he got there as soon as he could from the semicircle. But the point I'm making is, you know, you get it at half time. Ruffy said, you know, he wouldn't get it at half time first because you knew you were getting Bertiol, they knew you were getting it. Sometimes players respond. People shout at you, go, I'll show you, I'll get out there.
But you're suggesting there kind of that JamesTown Analytics would be coughing up kind of soft players. Not necessarily.
No, I'm not.
They might be saying, actually, we know this guy.
I'm not referring to Jamestown Analytics. I'm just referring to that whole process of
you don't know the personality.
But there is no doubt about it, and I think for the better that that the oldies have been able to, for want of a better word, bully people.
Yeah.
And that's what it's gone. I see it. I'm 54 years in journalism, and I've seen an extraordinary reduction in that.
There's bullying and there's shouting.
But a lot of people would say they equate. You know, a lot of people say, aye, because you're trying to, what you're doing when you take it to the bottom line, you're trying to intimidate, aren't you? You're trying to use fear as a motivation.
You're also trying to get the best out of people. You're trying to get you're trying to get a reaction. Sometimes the best way to get a reaction is a bit more of a cerebral approach to it. It's not
I think in the old generation, my generation, we would generally react okay to certainly when I was playing and then like that, and certainly when I was working, I was a chief sub, and that was really quite a frenetic business. We react to that because of the culture we were brought up in, simply because the culture we were brought up in wasn't like, I saw a great one the other day there where somebody was saying, you know, now that mothers and fathers look after their children and take them everywhere, the great line in this guy's house, and it's everybody says, would you get out of my sight? Right? So you were banished for 12 hours. But you're also a product of a culture where you went to school and people assaulted you at school, and they were teachers.
And there's a clear authority.
They literally assaulted you. They took a leather belt out and bashed you with it. So you were used to that deference to authority. That's not the case now.
Yeah.
Completely different.
It's interesting.
Also, as well, I think you can still have anger. I think you can still have managers who will be angry at not fulfilling an instruction or not adhering to a style or not doing what you have requested. I think that's a different thing. I think how that's presented is very different.
Yeah, okay. I quite like some people shouting at me to get the best out of me. I don't know.
Sharp!
I know exactly. I'm old school. I'll get you later.
Throw a duster.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, goodness,
Listen, Peter, you're banging out of order and you let your man run off you. Okay. A couple of things I want to get in before we finish, and one of them is, you know, the conduct, and I think it's a society problem. It could be a whole programme dedicated to it, but I felt really sorry for Sky Stout, the 16-year-old girl in the abuse she was subjected to because of the photograph and people you know, throwing up abuse on social media. Not a surprise to me because that's the nature of the game on social media. The Antoine Semenyo within a ground threw up the point to me, Michael, is yes, football has to do more about it, but I think it's a society problem that does it. I think the ultimate is there has to be a consequence and a penalty, but there also has to be at grassroots level an education programme that's got more money spent on it than it is at the moment to change people's mindset. You know, a lot of people think it's okay to abuse and demonise and divide people and categorise them because they watch politicians get away with it now and the bile that they peddle out and they think it's okay. I think it's a society problem more. You know, if somebody walks in with a Liverpool scarf and is a racist and walks into that ground, there's no alarm that goes off through the turnstile. You don't know what they're doing. They don't know what they're capable of doing. They can get away with it usually if they're sitting behind a laptop.
Yeah, I mean, the racism thing on Friday was interesting because the player called it out, didn't he? He went to the touchline and reported it and said, "Listen, I heard this, and I'm not having it." I mean, sadly, racism in football is as old as the hills.
Yeah.
And you'd like to think it's much less now than it was when we were all younger, and it was, you know, you remember black players getting hell of a treatment from crowds as a crowd rather than individual shouts. The Sky Stout one is just, you know, staggering and disgusting. Very much a social media creation, that whole outrage, you know. I mean, it's guys going in and just looking for cheap laughs and just not having any compassion or thought for what they were doing in terms of the consequences on a young girl, you know. Just going on to make a cheap gags about her appearance, you know, and you just think, what does it say about them? Like, you know, as I'm assuming it was men.
That's what I picked on. You said immediately, guys doing this, guys that, and you know what? I just sat and read. Of course it is, guys.
It will be.
I mean, I always used to, women journalists when I was in the Herald, you know, they'd say, "Oh, did you see the comments below my article?" And I always said, "I've got two bits of advice for you. The first bit is about never read comments below your article. Very rarely they nominate you for a Nobel Prize for Literature." Certainly in my experience.
Is there not a line that says treat praise and criticism with the same disdain?
And I said, second, have a thought about what that guy, and I'm telling you now, I don't know what his username is, he's a guy.
Yep.
Have a wee thought about him when you go make your cup of tea, that he's decided in the midst of his day to try and make someone else's life a little bit sadder.
Yeah, absolutely. Listen, we could go on the whole programme on that, and I think it's well worthy of it. And we'll look at that certainly on the Journos and other programmes as well. Can't go without a top 10. Way! I know you don't like it. You want to shout at me, but I'm quite happy for you to shout at me. Based on JamesTown Analytics, transfer fee and contribution, and maybe a longevity and maybe a resale value, we had the top 10 players that had been thrown up for value for money that were signed, you know, some with the eye, maybe some with JamesTown Analytics in mind. I'll give you the 10.
Are they contemporary or historic?
No, contemporary. Yeah, because you can't put a price on Bobby Murdoch or Joe Harper. Simple as that. Ronaldo, 12 million, Sporting Lisbon. Eric Cantona, $1 million. Andrea Pirlo from Juventus to AC Milan on a free because he thought he was finished at 32. Thierry Henry, 11 million from Juventus to Arsenal. Van Dijk is an interesting one, 75 million Southampton to Liverpool, but delivers the title and the Champions League.
But how much from Celtic to Southampton?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a good shout as well, Hugh. Mo Salah, 36.9 million to Liverpool from Roma. Zidane, Bordeaux to Juve, 3 million. Company, Hamburg to Man City, 6 million. Lewandowski, Dortmund to Bayern on a free. N'Golo Kante is canned to Leicester, 5.6 million. I threw in Andy Robertson, 8 million. Liverpool to Hull. And I was just thinking the obvious ones, and I know Larson and Laudrup are Scotland, 650,000. I think Laudrup was just over 2 million from Fiorentina. Anybody else you can think of? Moravcik from Duisburg.
The famous dud check.
Yeah, 300,000. Yeah. McCoist was not bad at 185,000 from Sunderland. 355 goals later.
Mark Caitlin.
Hillhouse for
Aberdeen. Yeah, he was 600, I think. Maybe.
And one of the greatest.
Is he from PSV Eindhoven? Yeah.
And one of the
Thanks,
greatest.
Sophie.
Thanks, Susie. But one of the greatest players I ever saw in an Aberdeen shirt, Zoltan Varga, who came almost on a free because there was a betting scandal being involved in. And he's one of the most beautifully fluid players I've ever seen in Scottish football.
Yeah. John McGinn to Hibs.
Yep.
Which was
Some clubs wouldn't go to that fee, you know.
yeah, absolutely. But John McGinn to Hibs is a good. It's another programme. John McGinn to Hibs was a good bet, wasn't it? I mean, he eventually goes on to Villa for what, 4 million, but at Hibs he was a good bargain as well. They're there to be had.
Oh, I mean, if you go historically, Fergie always says Brian McClare was pound per pound his
steal.
best. His best, he says, pound.
Yeah,
Even
about
over
900,000.
he says even over Cantona, he says, and even over Schmeichel, he said pound for pound it was McClare.
I can advise you of this, by the way, just on that basis as we're about to finish the programme. If you ever come into contact with Brian McClare, try and make sure that you know exactly the amount of goals he scored and the price that Fergie paid for him to the penny.
Yeah.
Because he quickly batters you out into left field if you don't get it. And you know what Brian's like? He'll kill you with his intelligence on it, you know. So I always, as soon as he says it on a stage, and I went, oh, right, okay, you've set the parameters out here. But he was a wonderful player. I mean, great player for Motherwell, Celtic and Manchester United. Not a bad top 10, Ali. You happy with that?
Not bad, yep.
Yeah. Have we missed any other Dons out?
Probably, but yeah, those are two.
Well, I mean, if you take about the whole Aberdeen great side, 83, I mean, I imagine that the fee for Dundee to Gordon Strachan would be about 30 grand.
Exactly,
How much would be Falkirk for Stuart Kennedy?
That team cost pounds, really.
John McMaster.
Yeah,
Well,
well,
Weir was the only one that cost a sizable fee.
yeah, and even then St Mirren get Ian Scanlon, which I just can't believe. What a player he was. Listen, it's great. And Michael, I make you a promise now on this programme.
I'll never be here again.
I'll take that.
Because it's just because you can't take criticism, you know. You need somebody to shout at you. No, I'm making you a promise right now on the programme that the next time you're on, right, is, you know, it's going to be a positive thing where Aberdeen are on a run of good score lines, the lot. Now, I'm not
Try and stay alive.
I'm not hoping at this
You
point.
could sit in my seat then, because I'll not be here.
Well, I was going to say, it's like the boy from Manchester and he's refused to cut his hair until Man United win 5 games in the trot. And I can tell you, his hair is out to here, Hugh.
Mario Fellaini is his name.
I'm just amazed I'm on immediately after an Aberdeen win. I thought this must be a booking mistake, but
No,
you normally have me
no.
on after some debacle from the Dons.
Listen, shut up, I wore an Aberdeen top at the start of the season. What more are you wanting? Anyway, great to have Michael with us, and Hugh and Alison. Absolutely great chat on the Journos. Hit the subscribe button to PLZ Soccer's Premium and you'll get early access to the Journos before we eventually release it later on PLZ Soccer's YouTube channel as well. We'd love you to go to the main channel and hit that subscribe button and support us all the way through the new season. There's lots coming up, lots of one-to-ones. And of course, our reporters are out there previewing and giving you post-match reaction from the managers and players as well. Women's Football Show is back up and running as well. Lots to look forward to from everyone in the Journos. On the podcast, thank you for downloading it. And on YouTube, thank you for watching.